Hi, I'm Kevin Gentry, and welcome to the TenX Strategies webinar series, where we help great causes like yours transform your effectiveness by 10xing your fundraising. And we do that by hosting guests, accomplished practitioners who work through a lot of their own examples and successes of how they've been able to raise more funds in a way, hopefully, that you can take these lessons and apply them to your own good work. If you want to learn more, check out our website, tenxstrategies.com. That's tenxstrategies.com. Be sure to take advantage of the free fundraising resources. You can sign up for the free weekly fundraising tip. But for now, take a look at today's webinar. We're so glad to have you. Thanks for being with us.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another one of our 10X Strategies webinars, where we dig deeply into a subject that we've been tackling recently through the fundraising tips. And today we're going to talk a lot about fundraising strategy and why your strategy is so important to your efforts in order to be successful. And for this, as you probably know from the promotion, I turned to two of the conservative movement's great leaders who are also tremendous fundraising successes and are great strategists themselves to share some insights about how you can think about putting together a strategy that will work effectively for your cause and your organization. So with me today, I'm very pleased to have Richard Viguerie, who Morton Blackwell has often referred to as the funding father of the conservative movement. As you may know, he pioneered the use of political and ideological direct mail for conservatives decades ago, and in the process grew what we would consider to be the conservative movement really into what it is today. But he continues to do that, and his American Target Advertising has a lot of clients, and he's continues to mail hundreds of millions of letters, and over the course of his time raised over billions of letters. And we'll touch on that a bit too. But I'm also very pleased to have Morton Blackwell, who's the president of the Leadership Institute. Morton founded the Leadership Institute in 1979, shortly after having left working for Richard Viguerie. And he had joined Richard in 1972 to help build the conservative movement. And then he took a lot of the lessons that he learned from Richard and applied in building the Leadership Institute to what it is today, with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of graduates. I think it's well over 320,000 graduates, and raised hundreds of millions of dollars. So this is what we want to dig into. We're going to welcome your questions in a bit. We have a live audience here at the Leadership Institute. Morton was kind enough to open up the facilities here, and we've got a great group present, and hopefully you'll learn a lot today. So, Richard, I'm going to kick it off with a question about strategy, and you have this great book. Actually, we have a great book. Yeah, I interviewed you a few years ago on your 4 Horsemen of Marketing and turned it into a book. It's available. You can find it on Amazon. It's print on demand. But you talk about the importance of the 4-point framework that Congressman Newt Gingrich used to utilize, and a lot of people utilize it, where when you're addressing an issue or an initiative or a problem or whatever it is, what's your vision? And maybe for an organization, what's the vision for the organization? What's your objective, or what are your objectives? What's your strategy? And then what's the plan? What's the detailed blueprint that's going to take you through to achieve this? Why is strategy so important?
Let me first say, Kevin, that for about 10 years, the leadership of the conservative movement that lived in the Washington, D.C. area, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., would gather at my home for breakfast for 2 hours. For 10 years, mid-70s, mid-80s, Morton Blackwell, myself, Howard Phillips, Paul Weyrich, leaders of the conservative movement. And then there was a period of time when we would reconvene in the evening with the same people for breakfast, this time with about 6-8 young congressmen, Newt Gingrich, Vin Weber, Bob Walker, and others. And during the course of the evening, we'd come up with different problems. How do we pass this legislation, defeat this congressman or senator? And Gingrich would always go to the blackboard. We didn't have whiteboards in those days. And he'd write 5 words on there, 4 categories: vision, goal, strategy, tactics/projects. 30 minutes later, we saw a clear path forward to how we solve and deal with this problem. So vision is really important. What's your vision? What's the goal? You're fighting whatever the cause is.
The vision is your North Star.
Yeah, it's your North Star. It's where you want to go. Goal is what do you want to achieve for your organization. The fourth, tactics, project, it's the weeds. The third one, strategy, is the engine. That's the energy, okay? Like a car. You have a successful trip, you've got to have a frame of car, you've got to have tires, you've got to have gasoline, oil, you've got to have a battery, etc. But that doesn't move the car. What moves the car is the engine, and strategy is the engine that propels the project forward. So if the organization, the project, whatever you need, you have to have a strategy, and we can talk about that at length here, but the strategy drives everything.
It's a series of movements. The plan has a lot of the detail, the tactics, as you say, but the strategy is the broader movement about how to get there. So we might have a fundraising strategy, a marketing strategy, a recruitment strategy, a communication strategy, a political strategy, an election strategy. Today, we're going to focus on fundraising strategy. With respect to that, you've seen a lot of organizations come and go over the years. You've seeded a lot of the growth of many, founded a lot, helped propel their growth. Looking back, when it comes to strategy, what were some examples that you might have of where people focused on strategy effectively and where they didn't?
Okay, great. By the way, that four-part plan, the number one benefit of writing that plan is writing the plan. Secondary, you want to implement the plan. But by writing the plan, it crystallizes your thoughts. You thought you wanted to go here. No, you see, you need to go here, more of this, less of that. Writing that plan is just so helpful. I do it before any important meeting, any trip, phone call, etc. What are examples of effective strategy? Number one, probably the foundation of all rests on professionalism. Okay. When Morton started the Leadership Institute in 1979, he had become a world-class marketer, direct marketer. And so he took those skills that he learned at the company, American Target Advertising, and applied them to the Leadership Institute. And so too many people in the nonprofit community feel that, well, what's the big deal? I learned to write in the first grade. I know where to sell postage stamps. It's a big deal. Okay. I myself have spent 45,000 hours studying marketing. For example,
can I jump in there? Because I think this is a really important point, and I've quoted you and I've talked about Morton in this regard a number of times. So first of all, we wouldn't fix our car today without knowing how to fix a car. We wouldn't try to fix our computer not knowing how to fix a computer. But we somehow think we all know how to fundraise, or we all know how to do these things, marketing. And there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. And in fact, many of the techniques are even counterintuitive. What we would think would work actually doesn't. What we would think wouldn't work actually does. So you studied, and then you trained your staff as well. Tell us about how you did that, because I think in and of itself, that's an important thing. Any of us could try to do something similarly. We can do it through a webinar. We can do it through watching YouTube videos. We can go to training programs. But how did you do that? And then, Morton, I'm going to come back to you about how that influenced your strategy for the Leadership Institute.
So Morton and I will not be able to make you a professional marketer, in the next hour here, but hopefully we will whet your appetite to go and study. Giants have come before us, and so we need to study these and read and study. So when I started my career in 1961, I became enamored with marketing. I felt I didn't like asking people for contributions, so I said I wrote them letters, and that worked. I hired a secretary too, and that worked. And so I decided to start my own company in 1965. I left Young Americans for Freedom. But in those days, Kevin, there was very, very little knowledge about nonprofit marketing through the mails. So I studied commercial world, and I learned so much from the commercial world. For example, lifetime value. I learned the importance of spending $1 and bringing in 30, 40, 50 cents back, knowing that over the lifetime value of that customer or that donor is going to be recouped.
Thank you for stressing that, because I definitely want to cover that a good bit today, too. That is one of the most important strategic concepts, I think, that is often overlooked. And again, I think it's an example how both of you have applied that to tremendous success over the long term. But keep going.
Peter Drucker, the preeminent business consultant of the 20th century, wrote extensively and spoke extensively about marketing. And he said that a business does two things. It innovates and it markets. And most every conservative leader that I know of who runs an organization likes to spend 90, 95, maybe 99% of their time on innovation, very little on marketing. And if they were to spend an equal amount of time on innovating, like putting out their publication and speaking and going to meetings, etc., as they do on marketing, they would all be much, much larger. Christy Fogarty, who was an marketing executive at Heritage for many years, in a Hillsdale meeting, brainstorming session years ago, was asked if she could go back to Heritage and redo her time there, what one thing would she do different? She said, mail more. And so
exactly. And you remember our good friend John Von Cannon talked about their analysis that 85% of the donors who gave $10,000 or more started as direct mail donors at $100 or less.
That's right.
So it's not just about direct mail, it's also that focus on lifetime value. All right, I'm going to come back to you in just a moment, Richard. I'm going to turn to you now, Morton. Morton, you had worked for Richard in building the conservative movement. You came and started the Leadership Institute, 1979. You have hewn to certain fundraising strategies over time. Maybe that was informed by what you learned from Richard. Maybe it was informed by the focus on lifetime value. But how would you describe the fundraising strategy that has guided the extraordinary growth of Leadership Institute? Last year, over $50 million in revenue. I remember when I worked for you many years ago when we finally crossed the $1 million mark, and that was big news. What was the strategy that guided you?
Well, Kevin, first, I want to give credit to Richard Viguerie. He hired me in May of '72. I was working at my first good-paying job at American Enterprise Institute, and Richard and I had lunch together. Lee Edwards set up the luncheon. A week or so later, Richard called me again. We had another luncheon, and he said, Morton, I want you to come help me build a conservative movement. I want you to come focus on that. And so I did that. And frankly, Richard was very keen about making sure that people who worked for him were as well-informed and as experienced and as competent as possible in all the elements of fundraising. And you ask about strategy. Well, actually, I founded the Leadership Institute in the final months when I was working for Richard. And in terms of strategy, we first understand strategy is a plan to take action. Action involves technique. Strategy doesn't. The thing.
By the way, if I could, and if this would help, because I know people struggle with the term of what does strategy mean. If you think about the strategy of the Allies in World War II, one of them was to open up a second front against the Germans.
Yes.
And then the ultimate strategy was one-day invasion somewhere, and then the plan was the D-Day invasion.
That's correct. Well, the strategy is the plan. Strategy is a plan, and taking action is the implementation of the plan. Thinking back about what new things I may have had in my mind when we started the Institute, there are two elements of that. The first element was I decided that there was an opportunity to build an organization with a high dollar, low volume direct mail. Most direct mail was very low dollar, as inexpensive as possible. I had been active in the conservative movement. I'd worked with Richard for a while. I knew many conservative leaders, heads of organizations, elected people whom I had helped, and I believed I could get really good signers for my, and then I set about mailing only the higher dollar elements of lists that were available to me, and people would give me access to their list. Some people donated the use of their list. Others, we began to do exchanges. The idea was that if we sent out really good letters that were literally more expensive and that looked more expensive, more high quality, and we went to the high dollar donors, it would cost more, but attracting those high dollar donors from the outset would work. And so that was one thing which nobody else was doing, and I intended that from the outset. Implemented it with your help. The second, if you can call it that strategy, which is a plan of action, my second strategy was I knew from the educations that Richard had given me and people he brought in to lecture us that most organizations do not treat their donors well. They delay thanking and they send dull thank you. I said from the outset, and when you came to work with me, you will recall that I said, and I still say it all the time, my aim is for my organization to treat its donors better than any other organization treats their donors. And whether or not we have actually achieved that, having that as a goal means we do treat our donors better than most other groups. I think those are two innovative strategy things.
I think you're right. And the interesting thing is you started with that strategy, the low volume, high dollar direct mail approach, stuck to that now for over 45 years.
Right.
And it has served you phenomenally well. And then you had the strategic focus on the careful care and feeding of the donors, and that has served you very well too. And it's built trust with the donors.
I think it's important to understand that there is an enormous amount of information available about what works and what doesn't work in direct mail and other fundraising operations. And I would refer people to your website because I know you list a number of very valuable books, and I would suggest that people go to the website and get those books and study them. Richard is a great student and also a great practitioner.
Indeed. All right. Well, I'm going to talk more about the going to dig into the marketing stuff a little bit more, but those two strategies served you very well. Did you update your strategies over the years? I know that you did, a building campaign, and you took on plan giving strategies and some others. How do you stick to a strategy that works, but also be conscious of always either updating or adding to those strategies?
Well, you have to keep your eyes and ears open and your mind working and think of other opportunities. I don't want to undertake any growth in any direction unless I'm reasonably confident that the donors will support it. My institute now conducts 55 different types of training programs. Last year we trained 43,000 people. Our revenue was $52.1 million. But I'm extraordinarily cautious, and I turn down ideas. People say, why don't you do a school to train people to take public opinion polls? That would be legitimate for it. And I say, yes, I think that's true. But I don't think that we should go out and do that because I don't know donors are going to be very excited about paying for.
Got it. Well, let me ask you one other question. You also strategically believed that you needed to build an internal development capability. Not many organizations have built that kind of internal capability the way that you have. Maybe the Heritage Foundation, maybe a few others. More today. I think, Richard, to your point about professionalism, that there's not enough professionalism, that it's important for an organization, if they're serious about advancing their mission, they need to build the capability to the extent they can internally. Now, you were informed by having worked for Richard about what to do.
Exactly.
But you believed that very importantly and strategically that you needed to build that capability internally, not to farm it out.
Absolutely. Richard made sure that his employees were well trained. I make sure that Leadership Institute employees are well trained. You can hire people who have successful experience, but it's also possible to take people who have no prior knowledge about what works and doesn't work and teach them and become more effective. And I've done that on many occasions.
That is a great point, Mark. I couldn't agree more. I think that as long as a person has a passion for the cause and is principled and has integrity and humility, you can teach them these skills and turn them into a great fundraiser. In fact, I think if you quiz people around, nobody envisioned to be a fundraiser in a nonprofit organization. There's no college preparation given for that.
Right.
And so they fall into the role, and then they're ultimately taught how to do it. All right, I want to go back on the marketing piece, Richard. You have said that really your fundraising is downhill from your marketing. If you get your marketing right, the fundraising is much easier. Not easy, but easier. If you don't get your marketing right, you're running uphill with the wind in your face.
Right.
Why is getting your marketing so important?
Well, then you get into the 4 horsemen of marketing.
There you go. We're going to show the book again. There we go. The 4 horsemen of marketing, everybody.
So you've got to get these 4 things right to your audience. 3 doesn't work. You've got to get all 4. 1, position, and that's a private decision. You decide, I want to focus on taxes, foreign policy, cultural issues, social issues, whatever it might be. So you decide that privately, and that's called position. That's your hole in the marketplace. What are you doing that no one else is doing?
So, for example, Morton's has been training conservative activists. Nobody else, maybe some others may try to do it, but he owns that hole in the marketplace. That's how he's identified. And when you think about training, you think about Morton Blackwell and the Leadership Institute.
Right.
Okay, great.
And then number 2 is differentiation. That's what you do to publicly tell everybody that you got a hole in the marketplace. I like to use the example of Fox Television. Rupert Murdoch decided 40 years ago he wanted to have a cable television network. And so he went out and established it. And then he didn't go out there and take out billboard ads or run billboard ads or TV, radio ads. He hired Megyn Kelly, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, now Jesse Waters, Laura Ingraham, etc. And so the public appearance of Fox is different than anywhere else on television. 3rd is benefit. So he offers a benefit, particularly in the beginning, that wasn't available anywhere else on television. 4th is the ball game. That's the brand, okay? And you get the brand right, you're going downhill with the wind to your face. Get the brand wrong.
Wind at your back.
Wind at your back, thank you. And if you get it wrong, you got the wind in your face there. So brand is the ball game. And then so what is it that you do that nobody else does?
So what are some examples of a few organizations in your mind that have a strong brand?
Our former client for 20 years, Hillsdale College.
You've got their necktie on.
I have their, Morton only has...
It's a small private college in rural Michigan.
It's 1,500 students.
And yet everybody, or a lot of people, know about Hillsdale College. So it has a strong brand.
Morton only wears Adam Smith ties. I only wear Hillsdale College ties. So when we started marketing for them, there's, they're not enough, but there are other conservative colleges out there. So we gave them the brand in those days, back 20 plus years ago, of teaching our country's founding documents, Constitution, the Federalist Papers, the Declaration of Independence, etc. And being a college is very credible. That's what they did. And, they developed 750,000 donors for that hole in the marketplace. Okay.
And that's a good example, because if you hear Larry Arnn on the radio or television, whatever, he advertises that Hillsdale does. Yeah. So that's the differentiation as well. Okay, this is great. So your point that marketing is extremely important. Plenty of organizations have a very weak brand. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard for them to stand out. It's hard for them to be what Seth Godin calls that purple cow. And you can comment on that. But what I'd like you to talk a little bit more about is, how did you train your staff back in the day? You identified some of the best marketing experts, and you brought them in and you had them teach I mean, tell us more about how can we learn from the best. Sir Isaac Newton said, I can see further when I stand on the shoulders of giants. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Go ahead and draw from the wisdom that's been accumulated before. How did you tap the marketing wisdom that was there even then?
I was very fortunate in my life to have 4 mentors, and I encourage young people to seek out a mentor if possible. So I started my company in January of 1965. In May of 1965, I flew to New York for a 1-week training session by the man who was the official teacher of the Direct Mail Association that became later the Direct Marketing Association, but it was mail in those days. Spent a week with him, and Ed Mayer, a giant of a marketer, and we just enjoyed each other's company so much. I learned so much from him. He started to come to my office, and he came to my office for the next 12, 13 years, spent every month. He would spend all day talking to the Morton Blackwells there and others, and then we'd go out to dinner with half a dozen or so employees. But this was the number one expert maybe in direct mail in the country. Came to our office, every month for 10, 12 years. He died suddenly of a heart attack. I get a call a few weeks later from a man says, your guru just died. Can I be your new guru? And that was Dick Benson. And he was also 10 feet tall in marketing. So he did the same thing. He came to the office every month. We'd go to dinner, lunches. And so I brought the best professionals, and I was learning as well as the employees.
So you would recommend that people consider doing that. We'll talk about the how a little bit later. But Morton, how important was what you learned from Richard and these experts in what you then took to starting the Leadership Institute?
Well, it was vital. I mean, anything as complex as fundraising and direct mail, there's so much of it is non-intuitive, so much that has been discovered by trial and error. One of the most important things is for long-term success is you test things. You have to risk to find out what works, but you don't want to ever bet the ranch. You don't want to take risks beyond your ability to take a loss, but to seek out the knowledge about what works. You can study the books that you recommend. You can learn this stuff by experience working for some organization which is willing to train you, or you can take training. The Leadership Institute does many different types of fundraising training, and I would urge that people Google for fundraising training. There are many sources of that, including the Leadership Institute. When you Google, you need to study how to win, and you can't guess with accuracy of what's going to work or not, because some things work in a way that's counterintuitive. You've got to test.
Well, I'm going to put out something, and I'd like you to comment first, Morton, and then you, Richard. I think the vast, vast majority of nonprofit organizations out there, that's been my experience, exposure, not just in the conservative movement, everywhere, are every day doing a lot of tasks, a lot of things. There are 10,000 different ideas about how to raise money. We got to write a letter to this person. Let's go set up a meeting with this person. Have we gotten this done, et cetera, day to day to day? And there is no strategy. There is no broader plan. So I think that's number one. But number two,
testing is a
no-brainer.
It's a necessary action. You have to test.
Right. And we know, for example, that 40 responses are statistically significant.
That's right.
So if you think you're going to get about a 1% response on a prospect letter, you mail about 5,000 letters as a test. And if that test does well, then how many do you mail?
50,000.
I thought it was a 5-time rule. You went to the 10-time rule, but you're always a little bit more aggressive.
We operate under the rule that I learned from Ed Mayer that Richard talked about. He suggested multiples of 5. So if we do 25,000, if we have a list where we have 100,000 people, we may test 5,000 of them. And if it works, I would not mail the other 95,000. I would mail 25,000 the next time. there may be something wrong with the list you got. Somebody
Right,
may have slipped you the best names of a list and hoping you'll rent all 100,000 of them. So you got to be careful. The rule of 5 we use.
All right, we're halfway into this discussion today, this webinar. If you're watching online, please feel free to put questions into the Q&A. I'm going to monitor those. Those of you who are here in the audience, if you haven't already, put your questions in. Those should be popping into my phone soon. But let's continue this first. What percentage do you think of nonprofit organizations that you've worked with follow a strategy?
Well, I think everyone would say that they have a strategy, but if you probe them, you might find out that what they're talking about are their dreams rather than an actual plan of action.
Well said.
I would like to echo what Morton said. The vast, vast majority of conservatives who run organizations think that a plan is a list of their wishes, their goals, their dreams, their aspirations. That's not a plan. But a plan is hard work. What's your vision, your goal, your strategy, your tactic, and until you get that down in writing and share it with everybody else. Don't keep it a secret. Share it with everybody else out there. It makes all the difference in the world. And I encourage young people for their life. Write that plan. What's your vision for your life? Your goal, your strategy, your tactics. If you don't know where you're going in life right now, any road will get you there.
Does any organization jump out to you that you think has been very smart and strategic over the long term and has thus successfully built a strong brand? I won't pick on you all publicly to name those you don't think have, but is there anything else beyond Hillsdale that jumps out at you?
Well, Leadership Institute, number one. I'm in a brainstorming session at Hillsdale about a few years ago. And the leader of the brainstorming session said, if you could only make one contribution, and it can't be to Hillsdale or to your church, what would that charity be? Who would you select? And when it came to my turn to give my choice, I chose Leadership Institute because I don't know any organization that has had such an impact with much smaller resources than many other organizations are out there. Morton's got an advertisement that he sends out periodically, which I really love. People who attend the Leadership Institute conferences, like many of the young people here today, are called names: governor, senator, congressman, mayor, city councilman, and it just has a huge impact out there. So Hillsdale, Heritage, Leadership Institute.
Well, so Leadership Institute has built, Morton, I think another important element of your strategy. I don't know, it was a deliberate strategy. I think it was probably more internal to you, but also it's a part of your brand, is that you've stayed very deeply principled. You've been very consistent over time. You've treated your donors, as you said, with respect and gratitude, and they've rewarded that, maybe because you stood out relative to all the other options, as you said.
We had a wonderful donor in New Orleans who was elderly, but since she was in New Orleans, my parents lived in Baton Rouge. I was frequently down there, so I got to meet with her often. And this wonderful lady wrote me a letter which I had framed and put on the wall at the Leadership Institute. She said, "Morton, your organization treats me like an adult. All the other organizations treats me like I'm an idiot. And that's why I'm going to continue giving to you." And she did. Speaking
of that, speaking of treating people like an idiot, and that was one of the first questions I got in here about social media, and we can move to that in a second. What comments do you have about the nature of a lot of online marketing, digital marketing, email marketing today? I think you've both expressed some opinions about why you don't like some of the approaches that they take. You want to comment on that, Richard, first?
When I started in conservative marketing nationally in 1961 as executive director of Young Americans for Freedom, it was not a mature industry there. It was just a little bit here and a little bit there. Right now, direct mail, direct marketing for nonprofits using the mail is a very mature business. We don't have to play Lewis and Clark. We have to play Lewis and Clark for the internet. Giants haven't come before us in internet marketing. And I just, I'm very frustrated. I think it's so harmful to the causes that we all believe in for people to send out emails like, "Hi, Richard, this is Donald Trump. I'm going into a finance meeting in 20 minutes. And the first thing I'm going to say is, hey, we heard from Richard." I mean, it's a fraud. It's a lie. For every dollar you give, somebody's going to match it 50 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. It's just young people who don't know marketing throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. But it's fraudulent, much of it.
How about Morton? What's your comment on that?
Well, it's still in a developing period. I'm confident things are going to be discovered about online fundraising in the next few years, things that we don't know. But we have to keep in touch with what's going on. Almost everybody I know who's serious about it does online marketing. My belief is that a lot of the online marketing does not treat donors or potential donors as adults, and they must be having some success at it because they keep doing it. If they didn't have some success, they wouldn't. I think to have a long-term relationship, you have got to develop a personal relationship between the donor and your organization, more preferably the donor and the head of the organization. The more the donor knows about you, the more likely the donor is to make contributions. I held in this very room some years ago a seminar for religious leaders, all denominations, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, and they were all serious about fundraising. And I asked them, you all have had major fundraising and you've all got large gifts at a time. Think about the largest gifts which your organization got is the reason, the fact that people are members of your church or members of your denomination. Is that more important, or is the most important thing the relationship between the pastor and the donor? And all of them said it was the personal relationship.
Right. Great example.
So that's important, and you've got to respond to people. And that's part of care and feeding of donors. A donor writes a short sentence or two on a contribution form. If there's some way that you can write a letter back to that special donor, let him even know you're responding to what he or she wrote there, that's binding, and people give to people, not to groups.
All right, that's a great.
Kevin,
go ahead, Richard. Yep.
Look, very quick, I agree totally with Morton. We're going to figure this thing out. Internet marketing might be this afternoon, might be 5 years from now, but it'll come down the road. But in the meantime, my counterpart, who pioneered liberal direct mail, Roger Craver, says that 90% or more of all fundraising now derives from postal mail. Postal mail is still the workhorse. It is still the king. And you may get that major gift of 7 figures, but like Heritage, it started with a contribution of $100 or less from postal. Then it developed into a personal relationship. Development team took over, etc. But the direct mail is still the workhorse of nonprofit fundraising.
I got a follow-up question for you, and then I have a question that's in the chat that relates to building the relationships with your supporters. But first, people who give through the mail are older. The average age of a donor is 72, 73, I believe. Don't we want to get the younger donors? Now, I remember when I went to work for Morton 40 years ago that the average age of the donor was 72 or 73 years old. And I'm guessing those donors were not frozen in time. In fact, those donors who were 72 or 73 then are frankly, fortunately, long gone.
Right.
They would be 114 or so.
Right.
But why is it, shouldn't we focus on younger donors and other means? It seems like the mail is antiquated. Why do you must have a financial interest or something. Is the post office giving you kickbacks or something? Why are you such an advocate for the mail?
Because the argument that you just made, I heard literally 55, maybe 60 years ago. Our subscribers for our magazine or our donors, are dying. We're going to be out of business soon. There's always new people coming along and whose children have left school and left home and they're no longer buying baby shoes every 6 months. But the one thing that I've advocated from day one was the importance of doing high dollar major donor fundraising that Morton does so well and other organizations do, but also to do the low dollar, that $5, $10, $15, $25 donor. And there's where your future 5 and 6 and 7 figure givers are going to be, the people who are today giving you $10. And by the way, the third largest form of advertising in the country is direct mail, postal direct mail. Number 1 is the internet, number 2, television, and number 3 is the internet. So when you mail millions of letters, you're advertising, you're teaching people, you're educating people, you're getting them to register to vote, etc. So direct mail does many things. It defeats legislation, passes legislation, builds a movement, educates people, activates people, and so the workhorse is still direct mail. And it's important to not ignore the low dollar. Major donors are important, but size does matter. Those organizations that are making a huge impact in America, with few exceptions, are big organizations: Leadership Institute, Hillsdale College, Heritage, Judicial Watch, etc. And so it's important to have a big, large base of support, and you do that start with professionally doing postal mail.
All right. I'm getting a lot of questions. I'm also conscious of the time. But Morton, when I worked for you many years ago, you were a beekeeper. I think you still are. And you would produce jars of honey from your hives in your backyard in Arlington, which is mind-boggling that you could do that. And as a hostess gift, when you would go to someone's home, and rather than take a bottle of wine, you would take a jar of honey.
Right.
And I remember you came into the office and said, "I'd like to send a jar of honey to some of our best supporters," which, as usual, I thought was a dumb idea, and then you proved it was a really brilliant idea. Why? Tell us about that and how it was formed by your strategy, anchored in care and feeding and treating your donors well, and then maybe we can bring it full circle to where that program is today. But tell us a little bit how that started, almost from a strategy. A nice thing to do, the right thing to do.
The truth is, I was, for 25 years, a beekeeper. I'm a retired beekeeper now. But I wound up having 2 successful hives, and in 1 year, we had such an amazing amount of honey produced that at the end of the harvest of the honey, I had 200 pints of honey more than my family could use in the next year. And I could have sold that honey. I was a member of the Northern Virginia Beekeepers Association, and we could sell our honey. But I said, no, I'm just going to give these jars of honey to the Leadership Institute, send it out to our top 200 donors. And I
went out a little before Christmas. You had a nice letter that made it personal to you.
Exactly.
And
we talked about my hobby. I had extra honey, and I decided that I would like to give you this honey. And my honey was good honey, and people enjoyed it, and the response was phenomenal. 200 pints of honey sent out, I received 80 thank you notes.
That's pretty good response.
That's an amazing response, because there's no return envelope. I mean, people are used to writing thank you letters. Your parents teach you thank people for presents, and you can't play with the toy till you've written the letter to Grandma thanking her for the toy. So it worked, and it immediately in January, I made our annual mailing, and a donor who'd given me $500 in October the previous year, she had a reply form that was computer generated, had the option of for her annual gift, which we asked them to give, of $500, $1,000, $2,000, or other. And she filled in other, and it was $10,000. and she wrote on it, "We really enjoyed your honey."
All right, pause there. Back to marketing. The purple cow. Why did Morton sending out the honey and continuing to send out the honey make such a difference in building his brand at the Leadership Institute? Because the honey doesn't have a whole lot to do with training young conservative activists.
Well, Morton can
What's a purple cow, by the way?
A purple cow was the title of a book by maybe the best known marketer, communicator in America today, Seth Godin, who's got a free blog daily. I highly commend you to subscribe to it and read it. He wrote a book called The Purple Cow. I live out in the country, regularly pass fields of 50 brown cows over here, 40 black and white ones over here. Can't tell one from the other. But if one of them is a purple cow, wow, look at that purple cow. So that's all of your goal in life, to be a purple cow. When I was dating my girlfriend, I didn't know it at the time, but she was dating someone who went on to have a major career nationally in business. And I had to separate myself from him. Say, honey, marry me and life would be like this. So you want to separate yourself. You want a raise, you want a job, you want a promotion. You've got to do something that no one else does. You own something. What category do you specialize in that you're the very, very best? If you want to understand brand, understand divergence. Look at a tree. It just starts with a twig, and then 2 branches, and 3 branches, and just keeps branching them. No 2 branches ever come together. They keep diverging. So when Morton came along in 1979, no one was doing what he did. And today he dominates that market. And so as a purple cow, you want to do something no one else is doing, and that's called a brand. A brand is when you are doing something and you have a product that no one else has. And it's right there in Kevin and my conversation a few years ago over breakfast.
Well said. And in today, we live in such an over-communicated world that you have to stand out. If you don't stand out, you will perish.
That's right.
You will, and I think we all get into the mindset our cause is the most important, so clearly it's going to stand out, but it doesn't. Your honey stood out. Now, I'm not going to say that's the reason your donor file grew. There are many other reasons. You invested in a lot of different ways, but we're about to come upon Christmas. I think you usually begin to mail the honey out around Thanksgiving.
Right.
How many jars of honey will you mail out this year?
Well, we can't mail out more honey than we bought, and we bought honey to send out this year to 34,000 donors. 34,000
jars of honey. I'm glad you're not producing it out of your hives in your backyard anymore. You would have started last March.
A lot of work. When the year after I made my first mailing, I realized that I was on to something, because the donors were renewing it better than they had before. They were upgrading better than they had before. And so I made the decision then, no matter whether I have excess honey or not, I'm going to send honey to the donors. And I never misled anybody. And it's been more than 15 years since I've actually had beehives. And I tell the story of I used to raise bees and et cetera. But I decided to continue sending honey, and here it is. And this year, as well as last year, we mail honey from Montana, and we never mislead anybody. We give them the story and tell them that it was from Montana, etc., and talk about my experiences as a beekeeper. And so they feel that they know something about me. Most of the people to whom they give, they don't know anything about them, but they now know something about me. And when they tell me stuff about themselves, I remember that
absolutely
as well.
I
see a lady raises roses, and I later in a magazine see a story about roses. I'll cut that out and send that to the donor, and the donor knows that this is personal. The donor understands that I know them, and that builds a relationship. So it's the person-to-person relationship.
All right. That's another important element of the strategy. Okay, I want to bring this to a close. And the question that has just fired up in my chat here is about mentors. And you all both talked about mentors early on. And the question that I'm really getting is, how do we find mentors? How do we ask a person to be a mentor? How do we look for a mentor? First, explain again, first you, Morton, and then Richard, why mentors? What's a mentor and why is it so important? And then we'll close with the how-to. Morton,
if you are looking to be expert, you're looking to accumulate skills, you have to go hunting where the ducks are. You find people who have high potential and build up a relationship with them. Over the years, I meet people, and I make an effort in many cases to stay in touch with them. And so, and it's true in any area of activity. We brought major speakers to Louisiana State University when I was an undergraduate there. Among them were Milton Friedman and Russell Kirk. And we brought them, they gave speeches, but I made it my business to accompany them when they were in Baton Rouge. And when they were gone, I remained in communication with them. And I wound up good friends with Russell Kirk and with Milton Friedman, and they gave me advice.
That's a great example. Richard?
I've learned late in life something, Kevin. You, as a general rule, mentees do not select mentors. Mentors select mentees. Of my 4 mentors, 3 selected me. They saw something in me that they would come and make a sacrifice and spend a lot of time with me because they could see that I had their views, their values, and then I would pass those on to others. So the 3 that one is living, the 3 that are deceased have been dead decades, but I am now still, they're ruling from the grave, in essence. Do
you have mentors younger than you?
Well,
do you?
No.
I have mentors that are younger than me. They don't have to be older.
No, they don't. Exactly. Yes, my 4th mentor is 10 years younger than me. I'm constantly looking for young people that I can help spend time with, mentor, and I do that not just in marketing, in my personal life. Young people that I've, at church or in my community, that I see something in there that they're going to be able to leverage what I teach them and communicate to them far beyond themselves there.
All right.
It's well worth my time.
So for those listening, those here in the room, what advice would you give to any of us about how we should think about either looking for a mentor or looking for a mentee?
Communicate seriously that you're a serious person. Read, study. Morton says all leaders are readers. Not all readers are leaders. Become a serious person. Commit to a goal and objective in life, and that will attract people to you to be mentees or to be mentors. So spend an enormous amount of time on Saturday morning, Monday night. Never miss a meeting, as Morton says, that you thought you might want to be at. Read and study. At my tender age of 92, I spend 2 to 3 hours every day, 6 days a week, studying marketing and business.
All right. Morton, one of your gifts that you've found as a way to apply in life has been identifying talent.
Yep.
Recruiting them, raising them up, just as we see people here in the room here at the Leadership Institute and the hundreds of thousands of others, maybe
right.
Many of whom are watching today.
Right.
What advice would you give to anyone watching or listening right now about how we should think about being a mentor or a mentee? How should we think about this?
Well, you look for mentors who have expertise and a personality that you can link with so that they would be willing to take you under their wing. And as a person who has mentored lots of folks, I can't say that I'm absolutely 100% right on judging people when I first see them at a school or whatever, but I'm pretty good at it. And frankly, being a mentor is immensely satisfying. When you mentor somebody and then 15 years later, they are leading a substantial organization. And if you maintain high standards that tends to make the people that you associate with operate from high standards, and you are comfortable, and it's really enjoyable to deal with people who are working with you toward a common goal of, say, limited government, free enterprise, strong national defense, and traditional values. And you get an esprit de corps, and it's comforting to have a circle of people who are not only allies, but friends.
All right. Well, this has been a terrific discussion today, and you two are tremendous mentors to me. Thank you very, very much. Richard Viguerie, Morton Blackwell, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. If you've got questions, follow up, and thank you for the audience here. And Morton, thank you for hosting us here at the Leadership Institute. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us for today's 10X Strategies webinar. I hope you found this valuable, and please take advantage of these resources as much as is helpful to you. Check out our website, 10xstrategies.com. That's TENX strategies.com. Sign up for the free weekly fundraising tip if you're not already there, and you're welcome to share these resources with others, including a recording of today's program. We're all about helping you get to the root causes of the problems in society with the solutions that you offer, but to transform your effectiveness by 10xing your fundraising. Thanks for being with us today, and hope to see you again soon.